And welcome to Charity People's live chat. And thank you to Charity People for letting NOVA Fundraising take over the live chats this lunchtime. So I'm Emma-Louise Singh, and in the green there is my lovely co-director of NOVA Fundraising, Emma Lowe, and I will let her introduce herself shortly. But just to give you a quick intro and to let you know why you're all here today and what you're going to listen to, we have the wonderful topic of should fundraisers be managers? And it's quite a broad topic. I think when we saw that, we're like, interesting. What angle are we going to go for on this? So hopefully you'll find our angle interesting. We are a small charity agency. We help small charities and medium-sized charities in their fundraising missions and help them do excellent fundraising. So we'll definitely be talking about the small charity angle, but we've both also worked in larger charities. I have worked in larger charities with a background of events fundraising, but it wasn't until I started working with smaller charities where I had the job title of a manager, even though technically I didn't actually manage people. So that's definitely something we'll talk about later on. And Emma, over to you. I will let you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Emma-Louise. So I'm the other Emma in the room, Emma Lowe, and I've been fundraising for nearly 30 years, and I have worked in small and large charities, and I've had various titles, polite ones as well as rude ones probably behind my back. So on the whole, I would say line management has actually, which is the obvious reference to management, I think, in terms of recruitment in particular, the title manager has, for me, related a lot to line management, and it is something I've absolutely loved doing in my career. You'd have to ask the people who've been managed by me whether they felt the same about it. But I definitely felt very, very valued very early in my career because I was actually invested in, and it was the charity Crisis, the homelessness charity, that invested in me to become a manager. And I actually went on a proper management qualification course with the Open University. I can't quite remember, but I think they part paid and I paid the rest. And it really was a great start into line management. So I think that's the really first key point we probably do want to make, that if you're going to have line management in your job title, you must either have some experience or some proper training, because it's a really important activity. So we'll come back to that in a minute, but it's definitely something I've loved in my job. But like Emma-Louise, I've also had manager in the title and not had line management experience. So we're going to say a few things, I think, in a moment about how it's not just necessarily about that. So on to our chat.
And I think it's really interesting what you were saying earlier, Emma, about being invested in as a manager, because I know when I've always been thrown into a managerial role, much like I fell into fundraising, I was thrown into becoming a people manager. So I think that's a really good point about investment, because if you feel like you're doing a good job and you feel invested in, you're going to enjoy it more and hopefully excel in it. And I think we all know the dropout rates in the charity sector of people moving on. And I do wonder how much of that is from lack of investment or not getting the right training at the right stage in your career. Fascinating.
Yeah, it's a big topic. So we've got, I think, now about 15 minutes to crack on. I'm going to start by asking you a very focused question to give you, let's get this discussion going. So the first question is for you. We obviously work at NOVA Fundraising with a lot of small charities. That is our current specialism. Some of them at the right beginning of their fundraising journey and might be looking to recruit their first fundraiser, or maybe they've had a few fundraisers, but they might be thinking about the role. So the first question is, should they be looking for a fundraising manager? Is that what that person should be called?
Brilliant question, Emma. It's almost like we wrote these in advance, isn't it? They're such good questions. So our answer to that really relates back to the environment for fundraising. So one thing that Emma and I are both passionate about, as well as fundraising, is fundraisers. And we hate the thought of fundraisers being left in the corner on their own devices and just being told, right, you go off and raise lots and lots of money and come back and tell us when you've done it. We, as Emma said earlier, want fundraisers to be invested in. We want them to be at the centre and part of that team, and we want them to be able to do a really good job. So one thing that we always do at NOVA Fundraising before we ever advise someone takes on a fundraiser is to make sure they're fundraising ready. And what we mean by fundraising ready is ensuring that they've got the tools and the right environment to do really good fundraising. Because if you haven't got the right ask, the right stories, the understanding within the team of what fundraising is and potentially what it's not, then you can only do so much. So we really want an organisation to be able to invest in their fundraising environment and in the fundraising toolkit before they even think about getting a fundraiser. And I guess that links back to us being quite protective of our profession and loving our profession and loving other fundraisers as well. So I think in terms of fundraising readiness and should you get a manager, it's really about knowing what you need for that role. So one thing we find with a lot of small charities, particularly if they're starting on that fundraising journey from scratch, is sometimes they need more implementers rather than strategizers and people creating lots of new concepts. They actually need people to roll up their sleeves, to write the appeal, to get the data off the database or the spreadsheet as it might be, and actually do the doing. So I think really understanding what that role needs to be is really important. I think one thing that Emma and I have observed is we've seen quite a few people move from potentially larger charities to smaller charities where they might be attracted by the fundraising manager title and think, oh, this might be a bit of a progression
from up the ladder,
from the title. And it can be quite hard when you go from a big charity where you might have teams pulling the data off you from the CRM to a smaller organisation where you've got to roll up your sleeves. And I think that can sometimes put a lot of fundraisers in a really difficult position where it's not the role or the job they thought they were going into, and it's quite different to the one they were going into. So they're not going to potentially perform at their best or meet the expectations that that organisation had for them. So it really comes back to that communication, expectation setting and understanding of what the role is about as well.
So what you're saying maybe is that small charities sometimes think perhaps that putting the title manager in the recruitment process simply covers off lots of bases, and possibly for the candidate it's not really true to life, that the job might be actually a little bit more granular and on the ground and delivering and implementing than it is line managing or even managing a kind of senior level.
Absolutely. I think it's it can be quite easy when you're not sure what you're after to be like, well, they could be a fundraising manager, jack of all trades, and that might be a bit of creation and development, when actually when it comes down to it, and I know from my experience I've definitely been lured into an organization by fundraising manager, and I'm quite a strategic person, so I love the thought of coming in and doing strategies and analyzing, when actually what they really needed was potentially someone with a really strong practical individual giving set of skills. But sometimes you don't know that until you've in that role a bit and gone, okay, this is what this organisation really needs.
Do you think that drives us on to the topic of workload management? So the range of skills and the range of tasks in your in the new job that you might be going for that actually relates to the word manager. What do you think? So the more you shove in a job title and in a job role, the more manager you are.
I think we've definitely seen job roles like that, haven't we, where there's a lot crammed in. It's like, you have to sit on the metaphorical suitcase to kind of zip it up in terms of what they're trying to cram into the job title. And again, it goes back to that fundraising readiness piece, being really certain as you can of what fundraising tactics are suitable for that organisation. What kind of person do you need? Do you need someone with a really strong set of people skills that is going to be going out, talking to people, picking up the phone? Do you need someone who is going to be a bit more of a strategic thinker? Do you have lots of volunteers and you need someone who actually needs to be really good at managing and appreciating those volunteers? So it's really knowing your organisation and how the fundraiser fits into that organisation, not how the fundraiser kind of sits on the side and waves their magic fundraising wand to raise money, but how they are embedded within the whole organisation.
I think that is a really important point. I've seen probably over the years a lot of different fundraising jobs get created, and I've written a lot of myself in terms of job descriptions and roles. And I think I would also reflect that there's a danger. I think it's our big sort of secondary point, as well as being fundraising ready, to really seriously think about the content of that job description and making sure that you're not just putting in the job title of fundraising manager to match a job salary gradation or level, or in terms of some charities have to connect their salary levels to NHS or local authorities. And I think particularly perhaps that's larger charities are quite specifically connected in that way. And I think my experience has been, if you're not careful, you can find that the role title has been created to sort of make sure there's a certain salary benchmark been met to have got the title matching the salary requirement. So I think there's a lot underneath that to be unpacked around salary creation and the job description. So I'm kind of keen that the fundraiser really does drill into what that job description's got in it, and really questions what the expectations of the potential future employer are. As Emma-Louise has already said, I think one of our key concerns is that fundraisers get put in the corner, crack on, tell us when you've raised 100 grand, and we'll give you a pat on the back and say thank you, well done. And our biggie, as Emma-Louise has already said, is putting the fundraiser in the centre of the organisation. It's often, in our view, the glue that brings things together. It helps achieve monitoring and evaluation. It helps achieve accountability. It helps to achieve improved customer relations, whether it's a donor in terms of support or care, or whether it's a beneficiary relationship. So, and often, as we know, in certain organisations, those two are actually very similar and connected. So I think we would go on to say that the role manager is really important. It's not just about line management. It can be about an enormous level of relationship management. So in terms of encouraging great skills to enter your organisation, in terms of looking after high net worth individuals, for example. You know, they may have had really senior roles in industry or in the community or in government in their life, and those individuals need managing. So I think we know possibly something some of you will agree with. If you are listening live and want to chat into the comment box, please do express your view. But we think that the management of relationships is equally as important as the line management of staff. So we've mentioned it being invested in and qualified and trained to manage staff, but we also think there's a lot in this debate about managing relationships. So you could be responsible for individual giving as a specialism, and your responsibility is communicating to thousands of individual givers via the database and making sure those communications are all effectively done. You may not even manage any individuals, but you are, in terms of individuals, staff in your team or even volunteers, you definitely are responsible for a lot of relationships, and that is worth its weight in gold. And a competent individual manager or fundraiser that does that is really vital. So really important that the job description unpacks those level of relationships, we think. Over to you, Emma-Louise, and additional points.
Absolutely. I'm just looking at some of the chats, and please do chip in if you agree or potentially if you disagree. We love differing opinions to our own, so do chip in on the chat. See, Sandeep has chipped in. Hello, Sandeep. Thank you for joining. And we've had someone else commenting on how important that they agree is to invest and develop training for charity staff. And Sandeep says they agree. Every organisation does need a manager, because when a manager is there, they will guide.
I'm a big fan of that point, actually. Just to draw a point out about everyone, I've always said in my career, I mean, for good or for bad, other people may disagree, that everyone needs managed. Everyone needs to have a really good, whether it's a form of mentoring or coaching, whether it's an accountability in a monthly session to sit down and go through the numbers and go through the performance. We it's something I have always valued in my life. There's that ability to reflect and sit down and learn something new as well as be driven. And that's the joy of working as a partnership business to some degree, although you don't line manage me and I don't line manage you.
Well, we try and manage each other, don't we? I don't know if we succeed in that, but we do try. And I think linked to that point, managing doesn't always have to be managing down as well, does it, Emma?
Yeah.
It can be managing on the same level. So I try and manage Emma unsuccessfully. But it very importantly, as a fundraiser, it can be managing upwards. And I would say that's probably more challenging as well, isn't it? Having those skills to be managing your CEO or your trustees.
I think it's a really important point. And again, in terms of expressions over the years, we've probably, that's an expression some may or may not be comfortable with, but there have been some very interesting presentations, workshops and debates around your influencing ability as a fundraiser. And we are regularly put into a situation, whether it's with a donor and you need to influence and guide their next gift, or where a corporate partnership is going and how you're going to evolve that relationship and deepen that partnership, all the way through to, as Emma-Louise says, a chief executive or a trustee. And we know there's been lots of conversations over more recent years about difficulties for fundraisers, and we really relish all the work that our friend Claire Warner's done and others around wellbeing and support for fundraisers, doing our best to remove stress. Really, there's been a lot of stress in the workplace since COVID, etc. But even prior to that, where fundraisers were not able or equipped to manage upwards and feedback and engage and influence their senior staff and their chief executives and boards, and we do a lot of work with that in small charities at NOVA Fundraising to ensure that fundraising has its place at the table. And I think that is probably one of our key points. We actually asked a couple of colleagues and friends in the charity sector before we got onto this live stream today, and I think the largest voice we heard that was really, really true to this was putting fundraisers in a management title, or it's taking on board as a senior person, not whether it's a title or a SMT member or a board member. It's more that fundraising is taken seriously and it is important and it needs to be listened to as a voice inside the organisation. And that probably is one of our key points, that fundraising management relates to a whole host of things, combining people, line management, volunteer management, combining money and targets and relationships that relate to that, and of course combining reputation, that managing reputation is key, and managing each other and supporting each other through this. So, and
I just want to pick up on a point that Tim has made in the chat. Hello, Tim, about the challenges potentially, or the differences in managing people face-to-face versus virtually, as we all have been doing over the last few years. And I just wanted to pull that out because it is really interesting. I think we saw a lot of very interesting examples, didn't we, at the beginning of the pandemic, where some organisations switched really quickly to virtual ways of managing their donors, how they structured their team meetings via Zoom. So it's definitely a really good point, and how you get the quality of those relationships even virtually.
Yeah, I think probably to add to that, I would say as well that the choice has increased for donors and for relationship management. So, in the old days, we wouldn't necessarily get on calls in the evening with our donors and our supporters, but I've seen a lot of our clients anyway, Emma-Louise, with being able to connect with patients, if they're a patient-led charity, to engage them further and more deeply after work hours. And that I think does mean that a fundraiser has to be far more flexible in their hours worked than perhaps previously, because a community fundraising job is after dark now, necessarily not 9 till 5. So I think there's a lot for us to consider here as a sector around this question.
There's almost too much to consider, isn't there, Emma? Because we are already coming to the end of our chat, but there's been so many great comments, and if you want to link in with us after them, please do. We're always happy to carry on the chat, because 20 minutes goes too quickly. We're obviously having too much fun there. So any key point you want to end with, Emma?
Well, hopefully this hasn't driven anyone crazy who hasn't been able to shout at their screen or has a different opinion. So we're definitely, as Emma-Louise says, welcome more comments, but we're really grateful to Charity People for inviting us today to hear from NOVA Fundraising and our perspectives on this very complex topic, actually, of fundraising management. And hopefully they'll invite us back. Who knows? Watch this space, I guess. But thanks very much for listening, everybody.
Thank you so much and have a great afternoon.